If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lore by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we shall discuss the Cathayans, a term employed by Western vampires to define their Asian cousins. We will discuss their origins, motives, and what sort of cultures these Kindred of the East live. For literally thousands of years, Kindred has robbed many a mortal life of their existence, forcing them to join the great clusterfuck that is the Jihad. Scattered all over the world, many of our ilk rule and dominate mortal society in a variety of different ways, some more subtle than others. But I've omitted something from you. We are not the only scions of the night that rule society. There is one realm that the children of Cain are remarkably absent: Asia. Sure, the Ravenos rule plenty of India, but they, like the rest of the minuscule pockets of kindred that call Asia their home, are heavily outnumbered by a different sort of vampire. A group of kindred that scorns the myth of Cain, mock the idea of generation, and do not partake in the concept of the embrace. These Kindred of the East are not really kindred at all, but a species entirely separate from the 13 clans and their many bloodlines. They are a strange hybrid of vampire, ghost, and demon. Western vampires who are remotely educated in them refer to them as the Cathayans. That is not their proper title, however. Once they were referred to as the One Kuei, they now call themselves the Kuei-Jin. Many of our own are not interested in the Kuei-Jin, others, however, fear them greatly. Are the Kuei-Jin something to fear? Absolutely. Do the canines know as to why they should be feared? Beyond xenophobic ideologies that travel from their mortal lives to that of the undead, no, they do not fully understand why they should be feared. I do, for I travelled to Asia long ago for reasons I shan't discuss with you at this time, and I'm in discussion with a powerful Kuei-Jin in LA who can grow plentiful limbs and become hideous creatures that put the likes of Lovecraft's eldritch gods of horrors to shame. That is just one example of a unique Kuei-Jin discipline, as they are capable of setting themselves on fire as a means of offensive defense, with others are able to suck your soul clean out of your body without even touching you. They are not bound to the same free disciplines like the Kindred are, so they are totally unpredictable. What you shall know by the end of our discussion tonight is some basic knowledge regarding the Kuei-Jin, for I have my reasons to believe that they will soon strike us down and no one is prepared for it. There are some similarities in our history and that of the Kuei-Jin that run parallel with the tales of Lilith, the second generation, and the first city, but they are not interested in the mythos of the Kin-Jin, their term for us, the childhood of Cain, and neither do they care or understand the petty politics that surround our culture. The concept of generation is not an important one to them. I have learned that they measure their power by age and their progress along their dharma, which I will elaborate later. What I will say on the matter is that there are no Cathayan clans, Cathayan being a kindred term for the Kuei-Jin. They group themselves into sects, hierarchies, and similar schools of social structures that aren't dictated in blood variants. In fact, there are no variants in Kuei-Jin blood for the most part. The Kuei-Jin are of one blood and cannot blood bond. Certain disciplines unique only to the Kuei-Jin allow them to, but they generally can't bind the will of one to another. This also means that the Kuei-Jin cannot create ghouls. But I have heard that some Kuei-Jin are able to impregnate and become pregnant, as some of our thin bloods might. Such Kuei-Jin children hybrids are called Damphias. Like us, the Kuei-Jin drink blood to get sustenance, but there are some who don't. The lowest of the low, groups of Cathayans the Kuei-Jin call the Chi-Mei, devour flesh, just like the Nagaraja might. Some of the more refined Kuei-Jin have refined their feeding habits to literally suck the life force out of their prey, essentially drinking their souls like secondhand smoke. Unlike canines, they can eat and drink regular kind food. It takes forever to get them pissed though, and they sure are party animals when they are totally trousered. But I digress. The Kuei-Jin believe that their condition, being a Kuei-Jin, is their karma to bear, a curse that they must suffer alone. God embraced Cain with this mindset, may I remind you. It's just the Kuei-Jin cannot pass on their blood in similar fashions that you and I might. Most Kuei-Jin believe that they have been sent back to the Middle Kingdom, their term for their continent of Asia, for a purpose, with a surprisingly large portion wishing to seek Golconda, the mythical state of enlightenment where a vampire is no longer subject to the beast, but is in balance with their mortal self. Our understanding of the path from the teachings of Cappadocius and Salot, who both infamously travelled and studied in the Middle Kingdom, may well be flawed interpretations of their practice of Golconda. They are damaged the same way, mind you. Teeth and claws hurt like a bitch and cause aggravated damage, in the addition to fire and sunlight. They don't turn to ash in the sun, mind you. They rot, as the strange magic that holds them together begins to fall apart. And for some reason, I find this more intriguing than I probably should. Anyway, the Kuei-Jin can enter torpor. They have a cute little name for it. The Little Death. It is said they fear torpor, as they envision many a nightmare during their slumber. And being semi-wraiths, they are at most vulnerable to the magics at this point. Like us, they are too in conflict with their beast. Unlike us, they have developed a more intimate relationship with their primal souls after centuries of self-reflection and understanding, which in some sense is similar to kindred understanding of the various paths of enlightenment. They don't, however, use the same concept that we adopt. They have 4 chi virtues that come in pairs. The first 2 are the opposing pairs of yin and yang. Yin, the black masculine half, measured the Kuei-Jin sensitivity to negative energies, whilst the feminine white yang measures their positive energies. Then there is the hun and po, which is a representation of the 2 parts of their soul. The hun is said to be higher, rational part, while the po is the lower demonic soul. Yes, you did hear that correctly, Neonate. The Kuei-Jin technically have 2 souls, and it is hard to get your head around, I know. Even the term Kuei-Jin is a strange mishmash of Chinese quincunx and Japanese uji. Perhaps this would be a good point for me to talk about how a Kuei-Jin comes to be, for it would further one's understanding of their virtues and how they come to be if they are not embraced like you and I was. Buddhist belief suggests that a mortal soul can meet several fates upon the death of its body. It can return as a human or a lesser animal. Sinful souls can be reborn in the many hell realms, providing that we are not part of it already. Enlightened souls would become gods. For some souls, however, karma would have a different fate for them. The gods may have greater ambition for a particularly demonic or sinful soul, souls that suffer the sins of unrestrained desire and may return as demons who are forever hungry. I mention all of this for this is Kuei-Jin principle that they have fed into Buddhists over time, for they are the antithesis of this belief. They believe that in order to become a Kuei-Jin, the mortal has to succumb to 2 of 3 fates. The mortal has awakened to the darker part of their soul during their lifetime, the po. Such an event is usually triggered by performing constantly evil doings throughout the course of their life. The mortal candidate has died in such a traumatic manner that the po awakened at the moment of death, a circumstance only available if the dying kind has an overwhelming desire to live, which is not necessarily the same as not wanting to die. We all fear death in one way or another, while some just accept that they are destined to die. And in either scenario, the mortal must have a great strength of will. So with the great strength of will and the dead mortal, what happens next? Well, from my understanding, the soul of the kind passes through the centre of the underworld and our mortal plane. In less vague terms, kindred typically call this the abyss, mortals call it hell or the void, whilst the Kuei-Jin call it the Yomi world, a world that is said to be a howling landscape filled with nightmarish winds, plagued with monsters and horrific pains and squealing. I mean, that could easily describe the Sabbat in London, but you get the idea. The Yomi world to the Kuei-Jin is a horrible place for a poor soul to reside, let alone pass through. Most souls sent here become the playfiends and Turkish delights of the demons that lurk there, but occasionally the soul will be split into 2, becoming weaker than what it was already. Those already weak souls that don't fade into nothingness haunt their corpses. But the souls that become Kuei-Jin are not such souls. In rare occasions, the po aspect of their soul leaves the Yomi world and returns to the body, acting as a home and beacon of sorts for the hun to relocate its body or, in some rarer instances, embrace a different deceased body along with the confused po. At this stage, the po is a powerfully mindless soul maddened with pain and terrified with the incomplete hun, now tied to the corpse. This pain, combined with the overwhelming desire to live, causes the souls to unite and bring the new Kuei-Jin to life, or unlife if you allow me to be pedantic for a moment. This entire process of death, soul-splitting trauma, and the restoration and rebirth is a process the Kuei-Jin calls the second breath, a process I am told takes about 2 months after the kind dies. It is the only thing that scholars can agree on. Even if the mortal is cremated, the magic will fuse the individual back together as if they never had died at all. And like a freshly embraced kindred who slaughters all in the vicinity to feed upon blood, the Kuei-Jin feed on chi wherever they can. Most of these chi mei, the most beastly of Kuei-Jin, don't last very long, I'm told. They either starve to death, are killed, or enslaved by more civilized Kuei-Jin and hunters. Those that manage to balance the Han and Po within them are accepted into Kuei-Jin society, where they turn from Hin, a non-person, to Shen, an awakened being. They learn their disciplines, are properly initiated into society, attune themselves to Qi, and begin their path along a Dharma, which you could suggest is like our path of enlightenment, as the Kuei-Jin acknowledge that they are dead and needn't worry about concerning with their humanity. This process is one that takes 20 years, I'm told. Once they are considered Kuei-Jin proper, they are assigned a direction, which is dependent on the astrological analysis of the date on which the Cathayan rose from the dead. The directions govern the Cathayan's temperament and role within society. Those who are assigned north are to establish their wu, their coterie as it were, in the west and make peace with them, by ending the feuds with them that aims to disrupt the court, which is essentially their camarilla, but not so poncy and backwards. Kuei-Jin, given the direction of west, is tasked to turning the spirits against us kindred, which is similar to those aligned to the south, who are tasked to destroying kindred outposts. The south also has to reclaim dragon nests from Akuma, shapeshifters or Hengyokai. Dragon nests are not literally nests of dragons, they don't exist. They are areas where the chi is strong and the wall is weak. And the wall in this case is a psychic barrier that separates the Yomi world from ours, or more specifically the Middle Kingdom. Hey, neonate, stay with me, neonate. Those aligned with the center are encouraged to maximize their understanding in Hun and Po. And this of course leaves the East, who have the task of controlling a corporate or criminal enterprise from rivals, as well as enslaving powerful mortal families and use it to the coterie's advantage. And what does a typical wu consist of, a coterie if we use kindred terminology? It is a difficult question for me to answer, for my knowledge of the Kuei-Jin comes from Ming-Xiao, the ancestor of Los Angeles Chinatown, the ancestor being the equivalent of a prince, but more archbishop in principle. I have not been able to contact her as of late, so she is either in hiding or got too involved with the bickering over the anarch-free state, contrary to my advice of how to fight these simpletons. There's also the possibility that all the Kuei-Jin have returned back to the Middle Kingdom if certain sources can be believed. But I digress. I wish to remind you that once more that there are no clans of the Kuei-Jin, just the various dharmas, their paths of enlightenment as it were. They do not act in the same organized fashion that the kindred do with their clans. Dharmas are teachings to be passed down from master to apprentice. They focus on something in a singular manner, losing sight of other things, which in turn becomes a weakness of sorts. There are 5 main socially acceptable dharmas found within Kuei-Jin society. The Howl of the Devil Tigers, or Devil Tigers for short, are often depicted as demon worshippers. Whilst they play with this mindset in front of the courts, they really enjoy tormenting one's mental, emotional and physical selves and indulge in the same treatment. The Devil Tigers see themselves as replacements for the incompetent fiends of an age past, punishing miscreants and seeking enlightenment through the pain and violence of others, meaning that their weakness is perhaps they are led by impulsion. Those who were, and perhaps still are, hired guns, vagabonds, smugglers, philosophers and prostitutes to be of this dharma. The way of the resplendent crane are the inverse of this. They have no tolerance for rebellion, with some going so far to stalk devil tigers to pass judgment. They see the errors in the world and want to make it more like heaven. The resplendent cranes are strict followers of a collection of aneclects called the 8 Lotus Path, which is their formula for salvation. This does not make them the good guys of the Kuei-Jin world, as too much order can create tyranny if not addressed with doses of chaos. Priests, monks, police officers, and other stereotypical law enforcers and do-gooders often fall into this line of thinking. That said, a criminal could be taught this path as a means of redemption. The Son of the Shadow are emotionless necromancers. Fueled by cold logic, they seek dispassionate reasoning and enforcement of dharmic balance with frightening precision. The only things the Shadows seem to have any passion in is their learning and discovery, which often makes them fall under the silent and melancholic type, both as a mortal and Kuei-Jin. They are often white as ghosts, with almost perfectly stretched skin, like an idealized version of the most attractive of creatures, thus being able to draw unwanted attention or scare those away with their cruelty. I always presumed that Ming-Xiao was one of these Kuei-Jin. Anyway, I'm told that many Kuei-Jin who committed to this path killed themselves, had a family that neglected them, or were impeccably lonely. Or perhaps they were inflicted with a mental or body disorder, further shunning them from society. As such, you can expect all sorts of people to follow this dharma. The path of 1,000 whispers are constantly reinventing themselves, forging new identities after death in order to understand immortal life and hopefully transcend it. These can be taken literally, as many of them are actual shapeshifters. Whereas we have Gehenna as our apocalypse, the Kuei-Jin believe that the day will come when the world enters the 6th age. It is said that we are currently in the 5th, so whoopee-dee, I suppose? The 1,000 Whispers do not believe that the 6th age is the end times, but more a ritualistic death. Whatever that means. Probably a circle of life metaphor I'm too simple to comprehend. As you expect, this is the least common dharma in Kuei-Jin society, for it is the hardest to uphold. To create persona after persona means that they could be conceived as cold, for they do not make many attachments, destroying their loved ones to uphold their dharma tenets. They are particularly distrusted by the other dharmas. The last main dharma are the Dance of the Thrashing Dragons, who you will find the easiest to understand when I tell you that they are very similar to our toreadors in that they do their best to imitate life. Like the clan of the Rose, the Thrashing Dragons are often messy and vulgar, screwing everything like a wild dog in heat, regardless of whether it has a pulse or not, if you get my meaning. They are the Kuei-Jin embodiment of passion, exploring it along with martial arts and shape-shifting abilities to embrace their more animalistic natures. Like the toreadors, the Thrashing Dragons usually hate themselves as they wander around the courts of the Middle Kingdom with their breasts and bollocks exposed to the wind, and I do not mean that in any poetic sense. In addition to the Fantastic Five, there are 4 unorthodox dharmas. Think of them as their equivalent to bloodlines if that makes life simpler for you, not so much in relation to the main 5, but more in rarity. I mean, that's what unorthodox would imply, wouldn't it? The flame of the rising phoenix are the simplest to understand and yet the most troublesome to the Kuei-Jin to get on with. All of the dharmas focus on a new purpose for the Kuei-Jin. The rising phoenixes argue that the true purpose is to finish the task left unfinished by their mortal selves. By repaying this debt, they free themselves from their karmic state, which goes against the whole concept of the second breath. It is seen as a flawed philosophy by other Kuei-Jin, and yet the rising phoenixes just seem to disappear. Because of their mindset to return to their days as mortals, they cling close to their humanity and show the most compassion out of all the Dharma practices. The Tempest of inward focus are skilled at many, but masters of none. They search for the calm in the center of the chaos within them, forming enlightenment through principles of contradiction. Every carefully placed element becomes part of a circle that holds the creation. No one truth leads to enlightenment. Illumination throws shadows that bring understanding. Everything is warrant to be studied, but only in restraint. What you make of that is completely down to you. The face of gods claim that the Kuei-Jin are exiled gods, setting up their own cults and worshippers and extract chi from prayer. They are naturally the most heretical of Dharma, as they strive to balance their hunt and pull to reach the fabled state of godhood, even to go as far to create and birth their children, the Damphia, to seek their form of enlightenment. And finally are the spirits of the living earth. The Kuei-Jin that follow this dharma are shamans, interacting with spirits, seeking both advice and adhering to taboos. I'm told that many who follow this dharma do not indulge in food, drink or sex as others might. And with a lot of Eastern thinking loaded into your tiny undead brain, I will end this discussion with the beginning of the Kuei-Jin, as it might help you understand who created all of this wayward thinking. For the short answer, it could be credited down to Zhu, the ancient Kuei-Jin who discovered the 5 main dharmas. But for a slightly longer answer, we have to go back somewhat further. In the beginning, there was God, or rather gods, who I shall refer to as the Eborn Dragon and Scarlet Queen. The Scarlet Queen represents the Yang, the creative kinetic force in the universe, with the likes of warriors and artists crediting themselves to her, the guardian of emotion and ecstasy, passing that down to human and Kuei-Jin alike. She is said to have created the first human and land masses. The Ebon dragon symbolizes yin, the contemplative, reflective, and meditative half of existence. Sages, hermits, and judges credited themselves to him. He is said to be the creator of the underworld, the embodiment of darkness, feeding Cain the emotions of sin, lust, and quest for power. The Kuei-Jin are said to be the corrupted descendants of the One Xian, the 10,000 heroes chosen by the two gods, occasionally known as the august personage of Jade. God or gods chose the descendants to guide and protect the universe in ancient history. The One Xian were chosen by tests of skill and courage, feeding on the ambient qi in the universe. They would, of course, fall from their interpretation of grace, learning to feed off the qi of living beings and corrupt the tests of worthiness. Their children, the Jin Haie, tried to keep them on the path of righteousness but were eventually killed off for their arrogance. As the blood of the angry One Xian cooled off, God punished them to live as undead, now unable to acquire qi from the universe, but from the blood of the living and to exist in a brutal mockery of their former state. He revised the aforementioned trials so the former heroes and champions were replaced by criminals and murderers who escaped from hell itself. He then left the One Kuei alone to contemplate their crimes. Regardless to what I said a moment ago, I would like to have carried on this discussion, but I feel I'm beginning to lose you if I haven't lost you already. There is a lot of ground that we have yet to explore, so perhaps we can return to our conversations regarding the Kindred of the East another time. If there is anything I want you to remember about this crash course on the Kuei-Jin, is that they are beings of balance and imbalance. The imbalance of the Kuei-Jin reflects the imbalance of the Middle Kingdom and the larger imbalance of the East and Western worlds. The balance between mind and matter, dream and reality, and body and soul becomes increasingly blurred and oblique as the Kuei-Jin courts fight amongst themselves. To find a balance with oneself, as the Kuei-Jin, by righting their wrongs, to find their own place within their karmic cycle, they may be able to balance the rest of the world. Or maybe imbalance is a needed step at the moment. Time will tell, I suppose. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.